The ancient city of Taxila is the heart of stonework in Pakistan.
The National Command and Operations Centre has decided to extend closure of all educational institutions till 11th of April in selected districts of the country. President Dr. Arif Alvi confers military awards on officers and jawans of all three services for their gallantry services to protect the motherland. Islamabad High Court dismisses Yusuf Raza Gilani's petition challenging the results of Chairman Senate election, declares the petition non-maintainable. The Pakistan Day Parade will be held tomorrow in Islamabad with the already announced programs and timings. Commander Strategic Command UK General Sir Patrick Nichols Yardley calls on Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa at the General Headquarters in Rawalpindi. Regional security issues discussed during the meeting. Pakistan raises the issue of controversial Indian projects on River Chenab in the hydropower projects. A 7-year-old girl has been shot dead by security forces in Myanmar, becoming the youngest known victim in the crackdown following last month's military coup. Those are the headlines for now. For their details and live streaming, log on to our website. You can also log on to our social media handles. Stay tuned. Coming up next is Politics Today with Farrukh Pitafi.
The Faisal Mosque is the largest mosque in Pakistan. Located in the national capital city of Islamabad. Completed in 1986, it was designed by Turkish architect Vedat Daloki to be shaped like a desert Bedouin's tent. It is situated at the north end of Faisal Avenue, putting it at the northernmost end of the city and the foot of the Margala Hills, the westernmost foothills of the Himalayas. It is located on an elevated area of land against a picturesque backdrop of the Margala Hills. This enviable location represents the mosque's great importance and allows it to be seen from miles around, day and night. The Faisal Mosque is conceived as the national mosque of Pakistan and is named after the late King Faisal bin Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia, who supported and financed the project. It is the largest mosque in South Asia and one of the largest mosques in the world. The Faisal Mosque was the largest mosque in the world from 1986 until 1993, when it was overtaken in size upon the completion of the Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca, Morocco. Subsequent expansions of the Masjid al-Haram, the Grand Mosque of Mecca, and the Masjid al-Nabi, the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, Saudi Arabia during the 1990s, relegated Faisal Mosque to 4th place in terms of size. Architectural wonders of Pakistan.
Magla Hills, the heaven of Islamabad. The abode of God, a place where you can explore your soul and meet power of natural elegance of mountains. Spread over an area of 12,605 hectares, the Magla Range, the foothills of Himalayas, are youngest hills with an age of 5,000 years old. Magla Hills are home to around 600 plant species, 250 bird varieties, 38 mammals, and 13 species of reptiles. Magla Range is characterized by many valleys, scenic spots, and beautiful water streams, especially in the monsoon months. Famous for their tranquil environment and lush green natural splendor, Magla Hills are a particular source of pride, harmony, and spiritual delight. For the residents of Islamabad, many of whom make it a weekly ritual to scale the various trails to Damanikovo and Pir Suhava. Magla Hills send off its visitors with lasting trail of memories to relish in solitude and provide an escape from the relentless rhythm of life.
Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Viewers, one word comes to mind, and that is deja vu. We have been here many a times, and once again we have reached a point where we reached many a times. I'm talking about India-Pakistan peace hopes. India and Pakistan have seen quite a lot of confrontation in past many months and years. But recently, what has transpired is this drip of good news that is coming. One, a tactical agreement on LOC that we saw through DGMOs, and then we saw a restoration of talks on Indus Water Treaty. And now the Indian Prime Minister has written a letter to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, congratulating him on 23rd March. That is not all. Remember I mentioned Islamabad security dialogue. There the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the Army Chief both extended once again the hand of friendship. So this was going on, and then all of a sudden, first Indian media kept on starting building up Ajit Doval, the Indian NSA, that there was a backshell diplomacy going between Indian side and Pakistani side. Then we saw reports coming in from the Western media and Al Jazeera and others that UAE or Arab countries were playing a role. Then the European countries are playing a role. Perhaps the US or China are also playing a role. It seems that the entire world is intent on building peace between the two countries. The only country that still is lagging behind is India, because the government of Pakistan has repeatedly signaled that we want to have peace. We are going to talk about this letter, the fresh hopes, whether they are real hopes or they is a false start once again. We are going to talk about all these things and more. In order to help us understand these issues in the studio, we are joined by Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, a senior analyst on these matters. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Also a teacher of mine, by the way. Next to him is Fahd Humayun, the young, I mean at least younger than me, and very bright researcher and scholar on international relations and relationship between India and Pakistan. Fahd, thank you very much for being part of the program. Ambassador Asif Dutani joins us on Skype. He is a career diplomat and a brilliant author as well. Thank you very much, Ambassador Asif, for being part of the program. Then we are joined by Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodi, former Defense Minister, former NSA. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program as well. With your permission, sir, I'm going to start with the studio. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, very quickly, your opening statement on this and your interpretation of where we are headed.
I think it's a right step in the right direction, starting with the ceasefire at the LOC. And Army Chief's speech and Prime Minister's speeches also reveals that we are not focusing on the conflict, but we wanted to cooperation, something like that. And at the same time, today, when we have seen that in the morning that Prime Minister received a letter from the Prime Minister Modi. So these all developments generates optimism. But my submission is that we must be very careful. Because in the last 6 years, if you see what happened between the Pakistan and India's relation, especially while dealing with the Prime Minister Modi, earlier our previous Prime Minister and now the Prime Minister Imran Khan, Prime Minister Modi take one step forward and two steps backward. This is the trend which I noticed in the last 6 years. Number one, and number two here is
only 2 steps or 10 steps backwards.
But anyway, let me to be diplomatic on this issue.
Today we have to be diplomatic, right?
But at the same time, the good thing is that why I am very much in favor of the talks, because between the two nuclear armed states, especially when you have a conflict at the border, you cannot ignore. And channel of communication must remain open.
Right, absolutely, sir. There is a lot of optimism here. Father, your take on the matter.
Look, there are no two ways about it. This is certainly a welcome development. I think both India and Pakistan can't afford conflict, protracted conflict. I think there are a couple of points that are worth making. One is that Pakistan's position on peace has been consistent. Since going back to even 2008, Pakistan's position on the need to improve relations with both its neighbors, the neighbors with which it has slightly difficult relations, has been very consistent, very unambiguous.
Right.
So I don't think there's been a change in Pakistan's policy.
Right.
The fundamental shift in the region came on the 5th of August 2019 when India revoked the status of Article 370 and effectively cancelling the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir, with which Pakistan and India have a dispute that's recognized by the United Nations Security Council and multiple resolutions issued by the UNSC, legitimizing the status of that dispute. If you look at the letter that Prime Minister Modi has sent to Pakistan, sent to Prime Minister Imran Khan on the occasion of the 23rd of March, there's no reference to Jammu and Kashmir. The only reference is to the issue of terrorism, which India has maintained is the sort of sticking issue.
Terrorism and hostility. Amazingly, hostility keeps on coming from the other side of the border. From Pakistan, always cordiality.
So I think, looking at the letter and what it's intending to do, it's intending to serve India's advantage, which is that India wants to convey to the world, both external audiences as well as to people at home, that it's trying to extend the hand of friendship. It's willing to talk about issues while ignoring that the big elephant in the room at this moment, which is the issue of illegally occupied Indian Jammu and Kashmir, is nowhere to be seen or discussed.
Right, and that is important. Let me go to Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi Saab. General Saab, your take on this this thawing of sorts. In the past, we used to see that the CBMs were mostly regarding minorities or visas and all that, cultural exchanges. This time it seems that the bar is fairly low. Even, resumption of talks on Indus Water Treaty seems to be some kind of a CBM. Your take, sir? Sir, you'll have to unmute your Skype, sir.
Sorry, I hope now I am audible. So I was saying that it's a very good start, and the environments are being created where the talks can really start, because the talks have not really started except for these Indus Basin. There's a series of good things which have happened, which you have mentioned, so no need to repeat them. But as they say that actions speak louder than words, so we'll have to see that what actions India actually take. Because I was there once the Prime Minister gave his speech, and you must have also heard it, and then later on follow-up speech by Chief of Army Staff on 17th and 18th of this month on National Security Dialogue platform. And Prime Minister clearly and categorically staked out that there is only one prerequisite for the talks to start, and that was reinstating of Article 370. He talked about that once that is done, then talks. And of course, he gave us the concept of security, and we are all aware that he said that kinetics is no more the main thing, and he talked other things. He appealed to India about the hapless, poverty of the people of this area and all that. So that is good. But one thing, of course, there's a good response from India so far, and we also know that the countries, those are behind it. Now, keeping all these things in mind, I just would like to highlight two things. One, that those who are behind this thing, and of course, United States being the main country, they are strategic partners of India and not Pakistan. They require, Americans, they require Pakistan again, umpteenth time, to do some work for them in Afghanistan. And if you look at the history of Pak-US relations, which has been from their side transactive in nature always, so whenever they are through.
I will want you to address this aspect as well. But since we are talking about India and Pakistan, let us first, go full circuit and go to the fourth guest. Ambassador Saab, your take on the initiative, if you can call it an initiative. Are you hopeful, sir? Are you optimistic?
Well, I think initiative from Pakistan, from our Prime Minister and Army is worthy. But has this been adequately respected from India? I'm not sure because my pessimism draws from Mr. Modi's letter on 22nd March on the eve of Pakistan's national, and in which in the second sentence he says India desires cordial relations with the people of Pakistan, and that further he then says that the sting is that for this an environment of trust, devoid of terror and hostility is imperative. I'm afraid Mr. Modi, in fact, has not been serious. So in that respect, I think we should not entertain too much hope, and we should not give in too much as far as diplomatic initiatives are concerned. We have taken the initiative, and we got the response. So, while we have taken the initiative, Indians have not. India had to reciprocate, but they have reciprocated with their old beaten lines, and that is not a good home. Yes.
Right. So, basically, is it cautiously optimistic? Is it correct characterization of what you are saying?
No, I'm not even cautiously optimistic. Reason being that Mr. Modi has not responded the manner Prime Minister did that, or Army Chief talked about resetting the relationship.
Right. Yes. Let me come back to the studio. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, since we are talking about two speeches and one letter. In the letter, as Fahad has actually pointed out, there is clear mention of terrorism and there is mention of hostility. And from Pakistani side, Prime Minister's and Army Chief's speech, especially Army Chief, when he talks about burying the past, he identifies Kashmir as the singular issue that needs addressing. How do you actually see that these matters can be reconciled?
But before answering your question, let me correct it. Yeah. In your first question, when I was answering, I was not expressing too much optimism. Yeah. I was just narrating.
No, and I was borrowed the word from your mouth.
No.
You said optimistic.
No. I said one cannot be too optimistic. Yeah. So,
cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. So, this is one clarity I want to make it. Look, when we are focusing on the Army Chief speech. It was entirely based on different conceptualization. It was based on a conceptualization, if you read from A to Z, of what we call it wider conceptualization of the security. He was more focusing on environment, economics, X, Y, Z, and within that, if we say military threat, it was undermined. He was in uniform and it was understood and everyone knows. Second is that if you see in the last 2.5 years, the Prime Minister Imran Khan's speeches, though he was giving he was forced to give, situation was compelling him to take a very firm and strong stance vis-a-vis India. Yeah. Otherwise, the Pakistani ruling elite, even in this time or even previous government, they are trying to engage India in a dialogue. Only Modi government is distancing from it. And if you start seeing from the 2004, or starting from 98, until 2004, it was a bumpy road in a dialogue process. Then till 2007, it was good. Then 2007 to 2014 again, some kind, but then deadlock. Okay. So in such a situation, Pakistanis are, you said, seems very happy. Oh, Modi has written a letter, and Fahad very rightly pointed out what was the letter. He was saying terrorism. Yeah. This is an important thing. India has been claiming, and India's allies are also buying this argument that Pakistan has been involved, or Pakistan is a terrorist breeding ground. So the thing which we try to distance ourselves since in the last few years, we were successful, but at the same time he again reminding us that this is important point. Apart from that, he was not making or reasoning any or giving us. Yes, I understand that when we go for a line of control, fire is in our advantage because we cannot fire on the other side as they fire on the civilians because on the other side Kashmiris are on working boundaries. So we have a disadvantage in that fire, so that's why LOC fire control serves us. But at the same time, within India there are many things happening.
Yeah.
And there, if we continue relying on this conflict on the eastern and western border, and at the same time within the state there is a crisis, obviously it's not advisable to the Prime Minister Modi. If you see, they established some kind of a relation with China, and now they have moved towards us. But this rapprochement will be short-lived, my understanding.
Okay, so basically no optimism at all.
No.
Skepticism.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
My analysis is based on the last 6 years Modi's behavior.
Right. And Parth, let us not merely talk about Modi's behavior. Let us talk about India-Pakistan, history of Pakistan-India dialogue. Every time we build up this momentum, and then there is a dialogue. In the dialogue, call it composite dialogue, call it whatever you want to, sticking points are always the same, and they derail the process inevitably. This time for Pakistan, Kashmir is the only matter that might derail these situations. Do you think that Modi government can even backtrack from what they have done in illegally occupied Kashmir?
No, I think the BJP is now in a commitment trap.
Yeah.
They've taken such severe measures to appease a domestic audience that is now watching very keenly what happens with issues of minorities and issues of Pakistan, because those have been linked to the idea of the Hindutva nationalism that the BJP is trying to propagate internally. I think that it's going to be very difficult for Modi to, and I don't think there's in fact any appetite in India right now for them to walk back on what they did on the 5th of August 2019. One point that I'd like to make, and I think this is an important point.
No appetite in Kashmir either?
Well, no, of course there's an appetite in Kashmir.
So Kashmiris are human beings also. There must be some kind of moral.
Look, there is. I think the BJP project in Kashmir right now is very specific.
Yeah.
It's about changing the demographic makeup of the state,
right.
And I don't think they really give two hoots about what the aspirations of the Kashmiri people are. The Kashmiri leaders many of them are still under house arrest. I mean, the Hurriyat is under house arrest, for instance. But one point which I think is worth making is just on this point of the revocation of Article 370. A lot of observers have argued that Pakistan is walking back on its official position, which is that no talks can happen until India, reverses the steps that it took on the 5th of August.
Right.
I think it's worth remembering that Pakistan never recognized Article 370 to begin with.
Right.
So there's no room really for Pakistan to say that we want a return to the constitutional status that Pakistan never recognized that to begin with. What Pakistan has held is that the conditions that have been created as a result of the steps that India took on the 5th of August 2019 have led to a deterioration of human rights and a deprivation of their legitimate right to self-determination. So Pakistan has said that those conditions need to be reversed.
And that is quite an interesting argument to make. And one aspect, and I have to bring in the other guest as well, is that Pakistan merely will say that until Kashmir issue is resolved, the status quo before, after the standstill agreement and before August 5th should be restored, because that was where we left while we were talking. So this is an argument that can be made without changing position.
Yeah.
Let me go to Gerald Saab. Gerald Saab, your take on this aspect. Is there any possibility at all that India might be able to, create some conducive environment in illegally occupied Kashmir before dialogue can begin? Once again, Gerald Saab, once again you'll have to unmute your mic, sir.
Happens automatically or some. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I was saying that because I heard both the speeches, what I have gleaned out of it is that Pakistan has indicated that if we start talking on Kashmir before waiting for its final resolution, we can resolve some smaller issues like Sar Creek, like Siachen and others. I think this thing was given. So Pakistan is not saying that we will first resolve Kashmir and then talk on other matters. They only said that we will start talking on Kashmir and if that is accepted as also a problem between us, we can resolve other issues before that. This is the impression which I got. But the thing is that it is just few days back that these things have happened, and we are excited because it was after a very long time that something did happen. Otherwise, whatever has happened is not of that significance that we can start drawing very concrete conclusions from this. We'll have to see 2-3 things. One, that is there any let-up in the atrocities that are being perpetrated in Indian-occupied Kashmir? One. Secondly, is there any cessation of actions which Indians are employing their proxies through Afghanistan into Balochistan and all these things? And is their general hostility, diplomatic hostility in the world at large has subsided? So unless these few indicators are there, and then their willingness, this is right as the brother was saying that we have no position on 370 because we don't recognize that. But that has actually antagonized Kashmiris, the whole lot of them. And if we start talking to India without this, I think it will give a very wrong impression to the Kashmiris, and they will feel abandoned because we have also taken this stance that we will only start talking. Prime Minister said very categorically whatever is meant, that we will only start talking once death is reinstated. So I think talking is important. Right. Yeah. So talking is important, and then doing is also important, and things have to be done gradually and in sequence, and many of them can be done. So we'll wait and see before really going to any final conclusion.
All right. Ambassador Saab, UN resolutions regarding Kashmir were about a disputed state of Jammu and Kashmir, sir. And India has tried to actually diffuse that status by trying to bifurcating it and turning it into a union territory. Do you think that Pakistan cannot even talk about what India has done and demand that India should reverse the course before we have some kind of dialogue, sir, because of our international position?
I don't think Pakistan can ever revert its position because Pakistan has made it clear, and Resolution 1951 is very clear that any action which any party would take would not constitute expression of the will of the Kashmiri people. India had taken the steps through legislative assembly elections, as well as they wanted to bring in constitutional amendments. So that resolution is very clear. So whatever India has taken the steps subsequently, and then this Article 370, which was revoked, that has actually, there is no legal position international as far as UN is. So, and then till the time a conclusion is reached and some consensus is reached at the UN Security Council by the party, this whatever actions India has taken or is likely to take in future would have no legal meaning. It would not enjoy legitimacy. Yes, they are an occupier. They occupied that Jammu and Kashmir, and subsequently they reoccupied after revoking the Article 270. In that respect, I think our people should not have any doubt, and that should be the basis of. Now you are talking about the modality, that how to go about it. There are many examples, and then countries which have disputes, they have been talking to each other. Even during the war, they have been talking to each other, whether directly, whether...
Ambassador sir, hold the thought, because I'm going to actually just start talking about modalities, and I want to bring in the rest of the guests, especially those who are sitting in the studio. Then I come back to you, sir. Dr. Saab, your take on the modalities. Because we saw that during BJP's time, back in 2000s, there was this composite dialogue. When Congress party took over, after that they refused to call it a composite dialogue, and they kept on dragging their feet as well. And now Modi government has come, and we don't even hear about a formal, structured dialogue. Do you think that there is a modality which might be present which can be used?
No, I think that first we have to see whether Indians are prepared for a sustained dialogue with Pakistan. Though we have been desiring, we are trying, we are approaching diplomatically here and there, as earlier it was pointed out that Pakistan expressed many times to have a dialogue process, to have a peace in the region, but is it suits to the Modi government? I'm just putting this by Modi government because prior to the Modi government, some kind of context was there. But in the 2014 and again in 2009, we have seen that the anti-Pakistan slogan was very much a catchy slogan in the BJP ranks for mustering the support of the Hindutva or Hindu nationalists or XYZ. So in that context, if we are expecting that Modi will be going to change his position, because he started his tenure by saying, as a prime minister, ye waqt hai boli ka na ke ye waqt hai goli ka na ke boli ka. That means it's the time for a bullet, not for a talk. And he seems stick with that. Whether you find it UFA, whether you find it
and we haven't actually made the bombs to explode on Diwali.
Yeah,
right?
that was. Yeah. But because in the last 2 years, one thing has established, the Indian armed forces practically lost their 50 years, this advantage in the 50 years which they enjoyed, which they used to call a conventional weapons superiority, which was exposed in post-Pulwama military standoff. And if you see that prior to that, they were always using their conventional superiority for a compellence, but after that, this jump to the nuclear compellence where you have very rightly pointed out, okay, these are not for Diwalis or XYZ. So even today, if you see Indians armed forces have to come out of it. Now there's a very interesting, in this LOC case, when we talk about the ceasefire, it was first time we have seen that Indian political leadership has given this domain to their armed forces. Their DGMO, our DGMO talked about it, and there was a ceasefire. So it means that they are looking that they're putting the responsibility on them as well, that let's move ahead. So in such a situation, of course, dialogue is important for India as well, because for their if this kind of tension continues on their eastern as well as on the western border, definitely their foreign direct investment will be affected. Whatever kind of their relations they have with the United States, the American businessmen or others who want to invest in India for a mega project, they need a peace in the region. Right. So that is important. But are these things will be going to serve Modi's political agenda within the state? We have to not forget here, Modi is a politician, and politicians first focus on his constituency rather than on the other things.
Right, but the problem with the kind of power Modi enjoys, Fahad, is that on one side he has total support of media, then army, then intelligence agency, then state institutions. Politicians of that type can actually create appetite as well. Do you see any possibility? Because recently when the DGMOs actually spoke and there was an agreement and a handout, at that time Indian media went berserk, showing it as a victory of Ajit Doval and Narendra Modi and their back channels.
Look, there has been a distinct erosion in India of any kind of democratic control over foreign policy. Generally, foreign policy around the world is the domain of the executive. Having said that, the opposition, media groups, these are important constituencies that still have a voice, you have to solicit their buy-in. Look at Pakistan, if you don't debate something in parliament, the opposition is up in arms that why weren't we asked, why weren't we consulted? We don't see that happening in India. In India, Pakistan has become a non-partisan issue. Conflict with Pakistan has become a non-partisan issue, a dangerous place to be in. We saw the ramifications of that in 2019 when even the opposition parties were clamoring for the Balakot strikes after Pulwama. I think what Jaspal Sahab has said about the devolution of autonomy, a certain degree of autonomy of command to district level commanders on the ceasefire line is very correct. It's because of that I think we should, and you rightly referred to the ceasefire agreement in your opening remarks as a tactical agreement.
It is tactical.
I don't think it's emblematic of some grand political will in India to reset relations with Pakistan.
Let me reframe the question and actually present it to you. My point was, and I agree with you, that there is institutional erosion in India, but that empowers Narendra Modi, right? With that kind of power, they can cultivate whatever opinion they want to. I mean, on DGMOs, the same country that was actually baying for Pakistan's blood, all of a sudden started celebrating. The media was constantly presenting it as a breakthrough.
Yeah, but
is there a possibility that they can, I mean, with the swish of a wand, change the direction of the country's opinion?
You're making an assumption in what you're saying is you're conflating two things, the desire for dialogue with the desire for better relations. And I think the two are very different. I think it serves the Indian politicians to show that dialogue with Pakistan is happening. I don't think there's a constituency in India that wants better relations with Pakistan. But it suits India to be seen as engaging with Pakistan. Engagement is just window dressing, right? After a very costly confrontation with China and following the disengagement on Ladakh, India really can't afford to be seen as caught in a two-front situation.
Right, and I totally agree.
I'd say engaging Pakistan from a position of a strength. And on your media, we have to not forget, Indian media is excellent in, even they lost 2 aircrafts and they were celebrating. What's about the worth of the Indian media? It's full of lies.
No, but they control their people's opinion, right?
Yeah, that I agree with.
I'm talking about authoritarian, the power of an autocrat. And this is what I'm actually trying to highlight here.
You can say.
Right. And let me, General Sahab, let me ask you one question that has just arisen. And that is, who does peace dialogue actually benefit? Only Pakistan or India as well? Because internationally, in India there might not be constituency, but globally everywhere, everybody that we have spoken to actually want peace between the two countries. Is there a possibility that finally they start engaging Pakistan and realize that it is in India's interest also?
I think this is a very basic question and a good one, and that aptly covers that why India has responded positively. Just look at the situation in India. They got a beating from China. They got a small beating from Pakistan. Indian occupied Kashmir is not in their control. Look at the farmers and all these things. Then they were exposed in EU disinformation lab, whatever Goswami leaks, everything. And everything came from sources which were not Pakistan based. I mean, the world therefore acknowledged it. So in my opinion, it was Pakistan that was giving concessions in a way that if you look at our media and our foreign office reaction on whatever is happening inside, I'm talking about the farmers movement, we have given it a very small space, and we are not helping them on the level what India does whenever there's a PDM movement, whenever there's a statement from the opposition against the army chief or whatever. So you just see what they do with that. So I think Pakistan was giving concessions, already giving concessions, and we also know that occupied people are allowed to take up arms, and the countries are allowed to help them as per UN articles. We are not even doing that. So in my opinion, those who are behind these dialogues, they are actually benefiting India, and the Indian vulnerabilities are being covered, and they are showing as if they are doing some ahsan on Pakistan, and Pakistani leadership is falling for that. This is my take on it.
Right. Ambassador Saab, let me ask you also the same question. This peace between Pakistan and India, and I'm neither talking about dialogue, I'm not talking about mere optics of it, I'm talking about actually qualitative peace between India and Pakistan. Does it only benefit Pakistan, sir?
Well, peace, you can't, clap with a single hand. So it takes two to tango. I think it could be reciprocal bit, and that is what I think India should be grateful to Pakistan that after the revocation of Article 370, Pakistan did not provoke the Kashmiri people in the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. And that was the sense of maturity, I would say, because we can talk talk about these war or war-like situations, but it's not good. It's not good for the people, for the country, for the economy. And already we are witnessing, both countries are witnessing that. It's not that India is having the field day, that is also a fact. It is not that India, in fact, whatever actions they took after revocation of Article 370, and it could go scot-free. It has not, because for the first time in the history of Kashmir, India got the bashing at the international level, especially from the media. It is now the UN Human Rights Council which is actually taking up and taking them all the time. In the American case, they have brought down India from a democracy to a source of concern as a democratic nation. Their graph has gone down. So these are the beatings they are taking, and Kashmir is part of that. So in that respect, I think, and the Kashmir this dispute has to be resolved democratically. It is not that you have to just, draw a line and then you decide yourself arbitrarily. This is what India has tried to do, and which has not been accepted either by Kashmir or Pakistan.
Right. So
I'm told that we have to. That's why I talked about the modality. I talked about the modalities, and that takes place through diplomatic lingo. And I think that language is not forthcoming so far. And which is why I said that what Mr. Modi has written in his letter of 22nd March, in fact, he congratulated the people of Pakistan rather than also congratulating the government of Pakistan. So in that respect, I think their bias is very much clear. Yes.
Right. One can actually read between the lines, and there is a clear indication what they have been trying to do for quite a lot of time. I'm told that we are left with 3-4 minutes. So 1 minute conclusion to each. Your conclusions.
My understanding is that we can expect, or we may remain optimistic about the starting of a dialogue process, because international community desires, people of Pakistan desires, people of India. There are strong sections in India which also desires.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we must not be too optimistic about Modi's desires.
Okay. All right. Then take a minute. Your conclusion.
I think we need to be very cautious going forward.
Yeah.
Any conversation with India needs to center around the issue of the outstanding dispute, the longest outstanding dispute on the UN docket, Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan needs to make it very clear what its red lines are.
Yeah.
Pakistan cannot afford to be seen as thumbing its nose to the aspirations of the Kashmiri people, because we have taken a very firm stance, a correct stance, a morally principled stance after the 5th of August 2019. And as the ambassador correctly noted, we did the right thing by not provoking the people of Kashmir, although we were well within our rights. I think Pakistan has rehabilitated its image considerably, and Pakistan should continue to say that, look, we extend the hand of friendship. It's always there. We'll talk, but we'll talk about all issues, and we'll not, not to the prejudice of any of our national interests.
All right, and that's a very good point. Gerald Saab, your conclusion, sir?
I think from Pakistan side, it is a step in the right direction. The Indian response has been muted, and nothing will happen unless the atrocities in Kashmir stop and there is some progress on that account.
Right. Ambassador Saab, your conclusion, sir?
Well, Farrukh, personally, I can't trust Mr. Modi unless he takes actions which can be verified on the.
Right.
Yes.
I don't know who trusts him, basically, internationally. But go ahead, sir, conclude. Yeah.
To Pakistan, and I think we cannot trust Modi unless it is verifiable on the ground.
Right. On that cautious and realistic note, I'm told that we have to conclude the program. Let me, one by one, thank all the guests. Ambassador Azhar Dutani sir, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time. Lieutenant General Retired Naeem Khalid Lodi sir, thank you very much for your precious time as well. Your contribution also always brings more substance to the discussion. Same goes for both of the guests in the studio. Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, always a learning opportunity having you in the show. Thank you very much. Bahadur Mayu, you always bring energy, and thank you very much for your perspective as well. Yes, we were talking about optimism and realism, perhaps skepticism as well. But I, for one, because I have always considered myself a peacenik, always want to believe that there is a chance of peace between India and Pakistan. And Prime Minister of Pakistan, the Army Chief of Pakistan, and many other influentials, including the Foreign Minister, Defense Minister, and others, have highlighted what benefits lie ahead for both the countries and the entire region if we work together. But I'm going to show you a clip while we keep on talking, and that is right now actually floating on the internet. Just see that a BJP worker or RSS worker is beating an Indian Muslim and asking him to say death to Pakistan or Pakistan Murdabad, Hindustan Zindabad. Is it the way you actually build peace in the world? If that is the case, of course, I am optimistic. But if the situation is going to continue this way, on one side we hope that a lot of good things are happening. On the other side, this kind of aggression inside the country and outside the country, we keep on saying, then who is to believe that there is going to be peace in coming days? Especially when the Indian ruling elite doesn't seem to have the intellectual or imagination range bigger than a teaspoon. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.
The Ubia National Park is located in the lush hills of the Galiat forests that stretch from near Islamabad to Abbottabad and through to Azad Kashmir. It is a sanctuary traditionally known for its spectacular scenery and its unspoiled, peaceful surroundings. But in the last few decades, that has changed. Every year, more than 120,000 tourists visit the park in the summer season. The area has become increasingly popular and is now bustling with traffic and large-scale development. Where there were trees and streams, there are now hotels and shops. The fumes emitted from vehicles affects not only trees and plant life, but also animals that live in the forest. The large number of hotels, summer houses and restaurants brings its own set of problems. The careless disposal of waste by these hotels and restaurants threatens the fragile ecosystem of the park. Garbage and contaminated streams are to be found all along the once pristine trekking routes. This solid waste and contaminated water has become a serious threat to the environment. Much of it is non-biodegradable, and the rest decomposes at a particularly slow rate due to the cold climate. The garbage can harm the animals of the forest too, as they forage for food. Where there were once streams of crystal clear water, there are now rivers of garbage. The polluted water affects communities downstream who have to go further from home every day to find clean water. Waterborne diseases force the local people to spend money on medical care, which they can hardly afford. All this pollution contributes daily to the degradation of the forest, and the eubia is under threat.